Are the West Tigers finally good again? So it is 2024. We're about a month away from talking about the preseason. So the offseason, the sagas, they're almost coming to an end. And it felt like Jarome Luai officially signing with the West Tigers was really the nail in the coffin for this 2023 to 2024 offseason. And it's been one that's been, at least in my opinion, great for the West Tigers. I thought that they had a pretty good offseason 2 years ago, obviously signing Api Coruscant and signing Isaiah Papali'i. But of course, those lingering questions around Madge was still there, who was always going to be on borrowed time with just the amount of stuff coming out in the media. And of course, the Justin Pascoe thing, that was always looming over the heads of the Tigers. And now we sit here in January of 2024. The whole West Tigers board is gone, and they've signed the number one half on the market. And along with Luai, they've also managed to get the number one up-and-coming half in the NRL. So it's fair to say it's been a pretty successful 6 months off the field for the West Tigers. And in saying that, though, I said this 2 years ago when they got Api, when they got Papali'i, that I thought that maybe this was starting to be the change that was finally going to bring the West Tigers back to top 8 footy. And, well, they've gone and got back-to-back wooden spoons. And look, I still think they're definitely in the spoon race for 2024. We've got to enter our predictions and stuff more closer to the season. But let's face it, I think a lot of people are seeing the West Tigers as a team who's going to be there at the bottom again in 2024. But from 2025 onwards, I think this is a team that is headed in the right direction, which for the first time, it feels like that way in, you could argue, over a decade. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, smash that like button if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel if you love your rugby league and you haven't yet already. And leave a comment down below. Where do you think the West Tigers go from 2025 and beyond? Because Jarome Luai signing, for me, is a big step in the right direction. It's a lot of money, $6 million for 5 years. It makes him one of the highest paid players in the comp. I think it might put him in the top 5 highest paid players in the comp. And look, I love Luai more so than maybe any other person who's talking rugby league on the socials. But even I know he's probably not a top 5 NRL player. In saying that, though, what we've seen in the past and what all the greats say, Jarome Luai is currently 26 years old. He'll be 27 when he's going to the West Tigers, and it's on a 5-year deal, which takes him until the early 30s. So looking at that, the West Tigers should be getting the very best version of Jarome Luai because he's going into his prime when he's signing that 5 years. So within those 5 years should be the very best version of Jarome Luai. Now, in saying that, he is going from literally one of the best teams of the NRL era to, let's face it, the worst team of the NRL era. But in theory, the West Tigers should be getting the best version of a player who's already won 3 premierships in a row, who's already been part of the biggest Origin Series win, at least in terms of points differential of all time. So the West Tigers, I think that Api, in my opinion, he's still probably the best dummy half in the competition. There's a bit more debate around that. And I'm not saying Luai's the best 6 in the world. I'm not saying that at all. But I think that even that with Api, with Isaiah Papali'i, I do think that Jerome Luai is the best signing the West Tigers have made in well over a decade, which I'm probably going to be saying a lot in this video because I do genuinely think that the West Tigers, this is the best offseason they've had in quite some time. And look, let's be honest, it was probably the best offseason they've had, regardless of what happened with Luai, just purely in the fact that they've got rid of Lee and they've gotten rid of Pascoe. I love Lee's hat as much as anyone, and Justin Pascoe's hair is delightful, but the on-field results they've been showing for, well over a decade. And I know Pascoe's done some incredible stuff off the field, but on the field, at least in the NRL, is where it matters. There's nothing that's going to boost you off the field than your performance on the field. And the West Tigers just, you can't play without playing a finals game since 2011 without there being repercussions. They've gone through all the head coaches, and I think it's finally time that they've moved on. And they have. They've brought in Shane Richardson, who was able to bring the South Sydney Rabbitohs back to the promised land. And look, while the clickbaity YouTube title and everything else I'm going to say in this video, I do think that it's going to be quite a few years before the West Tigers can even think about contending again. They've still got a lot of ways to go in their recruitment. Obviously, Isaiah Papali'i hasn't lived up to expectations. I think outside of maybe Api, Buller, and of course Luai when he gets there, no one really is 100% safe at the Tigers, and I can understand why all of the players are fed up and they might want to move on. Obviously, they've already lost Junior Tupou, who was a real shining light for them in 2023. And the outside of the three I just mentioned, it feels like all those players, the Tigers are willing to move on, which, let's face it, the way the Tigers are looking at it, they're not going to blame Benji or Tim Sheens. And they let go of Tim Sheens, but at some point, they've got to look at the players. And even though the environment hasn't been created the best for them, and literally every player for well over a decade has failed at the West Tigers, at the end of the day, the players are still the ones putting in that performance. I got no doubt like a guy like Sean Bloor, who's been rumoured to be out the door tomorrow in exchange for Justin Olam, is going to thrive at the Melbourne Storm, which will be very interesting. So we might be seeing here going, well, there goes another one the Tigers could have had. But at some point, onus does have to fall back onto the players. And it's going to be an interesting year, 2024, for the West Tigers, because I do think that they'll be in the mix for the teams for the Winston, but they can't get a third in a row. 2024 is going to be the chance for a lot of these guys, especially the young guys, to prove that they can be a part of the West Tigers for the next 10 years, because that battle for the number 6 going forward is going to be incredibly interesting. Look, I think the Aiden Caesar signing in hindsight wasn't the greatest decision. They probably need a game-managing halfback for 2024. But on that, Luai, I think, is the obvious choice to be the halfback going forward, which leaves Bud Sullivan and Latufano in a shootout for the number 6. And let's be honest, I think if, depending on the way this season goes for the Tigers, if they do struggle early and like I'm predicting them to, there's a good chance Aiden Caesar, unfortunately, could be on the receiving end of the West Tigers just going full on young to see who's going to be in that team going forward. I could definitely see a situation where Fainu and Sullivan are both in the halves at the same time looking to compete. I think a lot of us, including me, think that Latu Fainu is the obvious choice out of the two. He's the biggest touted junior coming out of the system, and Manly have been paying him $1 million since he was 15 years old. But Bud Sullivan, let's not forget that he was touted as the future halfback for the Dragons. Ben Hunt was there, and people were saying that Bud Sullivan needed game time, and they were going to push Ben Hunt to number 9, a guy who's been carrying the Dragons for years. So obviously he's got some ability, and I could definitely see either of them starting with Luai going forward. And I genuinely think that the Tigers won't have to purchase another half. I think whoever can get that number 6 jersey between these two will partner Luai for the majority of those 5 years, unless obviously one of them kicks on and they can't afford to pay either Bud or Fainu $1 million on top of the 1.2 they're already paying to Luai. Bateman, he's getting up there in age, but I do think that he can really be like a Jake Javojevic guy. I mean, look, he did it at the Raiders. He felt like he was the turning point. He came to the Raiders in 2019. I know the way he left was a bit of an icky situation. Icky, what am I, 12? When he first went there, it just seemed like he was sort of a, I know what I'm trying to use. He was like a Jake Javojevic for me. And I think he can be that at the Tigers, because while his ability isn't where it was in 2019 and 2020, I still think he has a lot to give, and he could be a tremendous leader off the field. I think Isaiah Papali'i, if I'm the Tigers, I am keeping a hold of him. I know that he wanted to go back to the Eels, and I'm not sure if that's played into how poor a performance from his Eels time in 2023. I mean, Isaiah Papali'i, for me, was one of the most disappointing players of last year. Again, though, it's hard to judge these players at the Tigers because we've seen so many stars go to the Tigers and will just fall off. I don't know what the rumors are about letting go of Clemmer. I thought Clemmer, while he is getting up there in age, could be a great mentor for some of the young forwards they've got coming through. And I still think that the West Tigers, they do have some good forwards. I think Stefano, we're just waiting for him to kick on. I don't think he'll live up to like a Payne Harsler, which some people were saying a few years ago, but I do think he can be a starting prop for a team that gets into the top 4 eventually. I think David Clemmer, while he probably won't be there until they get to that point, could be a great leader for him. And he's such a workhorse on the field. I mean, the guy is getting up there in age and he's still playing 65 odd minutes. And, you know, while he's not explosive, he's doing a job each and every week. Alex Twal, again, not an explosive guy, but I think a guy who could definitely help the culture of the West Tigers. And look, they backflipped on him more than anyone. So I think Appy's definitely got to be there. Like I said, I think either Faino or Bud could definitely be the partner for Luai going forward. I think Buller is without a doubt a lock. He's got to be their fullback. They're finally found. They do need an outside back, and that's why it's a shame that they're going to get rid of Bloor for Olin. But I think for both clubs, especially the Melbourne Storm, it makes complete sense. It will be interesting to see how Olam does go at the Tigers, but at least it's a strike player in the outside backs, which will be able to help whichever halves partner is. It's certainly in 2024, it'll help them a lot. They've made some crucial signings in previous years. This year, none more so than Jarome Luai, and getting rid of the board, bringing in Shane Richardson. I know he's only in the interim, but I do think that from all reports, he's going to be there going forward. I do think the West Tigers are on the up, and it's felt like a while since anyone said that. So it'll be interesting to see how 2024 goes for the Tigers, but I think that 2025 and beyond, now that they've got Luai, now that they've got a guy they can build around along with Buller, I think the West Tigers finally have an identity and they can finally build off of it. I think that we've at least from 2025 onwards, we've already seen the worst of the West Tigers, especially off the field. And that's the most important thing. Shut up off the field, boys. Stop getting on NRL 360 all the time. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know in that comment section down below. What do you think of the West Tigers? Smash that like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you in the next one.